All right, do you want to be well? It reminds me of a story in John, the 5th chapter, where Jesus is early in his ministry. He's coming to Jerusalem. There is a big festival of the feast, and he's got his disciples in tow as he comes into Jerusalem, coming through the gates, and he enters through the sheep gate. And there, near the sheep gate, there is a pool that we call today the Pool of Bethesda. John is describing this whole situation where the throngs of people coming and going for the festival, and when he talks, John is referring to the Pool of Bethesda. He says there was a multitude of people around this pool. Now, obviously, I guess in my terminology, there'll be a whole lot of folks over there near this pool that are infirmed, they're sick, they're lame, they're blind, they're incapacitated at some level, and they're standing by this pool begging alms as people pass by. They stay by this pool as a tradition that went along with this pool. There's no historical evidence that anybody ever was healed at this pool. There was a tradition started many years, we don't know exactly when, that God would send an angel down, stir the waters, and the first one into the pool would be healed. It had to be quite a scene that if the wind ever stirred the water or whatever, and to see the lame, the paralyzed, the blind, and the crippled and the sick try to get in that pool first. Kind of reminds me of a group of people prior to recovery. Always staying in community together, hanging together, attracted to the same things together, over a hope. Hoping against hope, maybe. Hoping that somehow their efforts would heal their wounds. That somehow or another would fill those holes within. Somehow or another heal what was broken years and years ago and never finding relief. Jesus walks into this crowd and steps up to a man that had been there, the scripture tells us, 37 years. It's a long time to be laying by a pool, hoping somehow or another that being even lame and paralyzed could still be able to be the first one into the pool. It had to affect his mind, his thinking, his attitude towards himself and life. Jesus walks up to this man, looks down at him and says, "Do you want to be well?" Now, you'd think that the first answer that come out of anybody's mind would be, yes, sure, that's why I'm here. But this man did not come from that. He looked up at Jesus and said, and he spoke out of his own identity. He said, every time I try to get into that pool, someone gets in ahead of me. Now, he doesn't say anybody got healed. He doesn't refer to any kind of, they're no longer here because they're fixed, they're whole, they can walk, they can see, whatever. He just says, I'm here in life, stuck, because I have no one to help me. I'm a victim here. Can't you see this? And yet that's not what Jesus asked. I think that what I want you to see is this, that Jesus is asking this man a packed question. It's loaded. First, he's asking me, are you willing to give up your identity? Are you willing to let go of what you think you are or who you think you are, how you see yourself in this universe? I mean, he comes up to this in a minute. Jesus is not asking, why are you still here? Jesus is not asking, why can't you get in the pool? Jesus is not saying, why won't somebody help you? He didn't ask any of those questions, yet that man responded to Jesus out of his framework, out of his identity. And he said, no one will help me. I'm a victim here. Can't you see this? Then Jesus asked another question, impact into that thing or enclose that thing. He says, are you willing to give up your community? In other words, if you're going to be well, you can't stay here in the community of sick. Are you willing to give up those people you know, the way of life that you know, the fellowship, the community that you've identified yourself with? Are you willing to let go of this? Are you willing to surrender it? Then he's asking him another question. Are you willing to surrender your own best ideas of how to get well? I mean, here's a man, his thinking is that if I want to be well, I got to get in that pool. I got to be the first one to get in that pool, even though I'm lame and I can't walk. And Jesus says, are you willing to let go of your own best ideas, your own best thinking? I mean, recovery teaches us that we cannot get better with the same level of thinking that got us where we were to begin with. Sometimes we go to a counselor. Sometimes we go to a pastor or a minister or a helping profession, and we say, I want you to help me, and I want you to help me this way. This is the way I want you to help me. In other words, it was almost as if that man was saying, well, Jesus, the next time if you'll stay there, and the next time that water stirs, grab me and throw me in the pool. It's like, I have my own best ideas, and Jesus didn't ask that. I think that in recovery, we've got to surrender our own best ideas. I've had to, even with God. I mean, there's times where I would ask my higher power, I need this or I need that, or the world should be a certain way, or my universe should be changed a certain way so that I could be happy. And God didn't do it. Boy, did I get angry. God didn't do anything I tell him. Why pray if he's not going to do what I tell him to do? It's rather audacious, isn't it? I think God wanted me to finally surrender how I needed help, the help I needed. Then he says, he's asking Jethro I call him Jethro, this guy down by this pool. He said, Jesus is saying to him, are you willing to face failure? Now, you got to face this. If he's laying flat on his back, depending on somebody else to throw him into the pool when the water is stirred, then he can't literally fail. It's everybody else around him that's failing him, and he's not failing. I mean, he is at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder here. He's begging alms. I mean, his subsistence is basically being flat on his back. It's hard to fall when you're flat on your back. So Jesus is saying, I'm going to give you an opportunity to fail. You're going to literally, you can trip and fall now. Are you willing to get up? Because if you do, you also got to let go of this whole thing of you can't fail at that point. So many people in a recovery, they fear failure. What if I start recovery and I relapse? What if I start recovery and I slip? What if I don't make it? What? Well, basically, you're fearing failure because where you are right now, you're not even attempting, so you don't worry about it. You're going to have to be willing to let go of this and be willing to fail, probably a number of times before you finally get there. And the last one is that as this man got up and picked his mat up, he said, I want you to go home. Now, remember this concept here, because this is kind of interesting. Jesus is coming into Jerusalem on the Sabbath. There's a law in Jerusalem, it was a law, a Hebraic law, that says you can't heal on the Sabbath because that's work, that's labor. Jesus, right in the middle of it all, says, I'll heal you. I'll heal you. And then he says to the man, will you pick up your pallet and carry it, go home. Now he was inviting, not only did he work on the Sabbath, he broke the religious rules and mores of the time, but he also invited the man to break rules by carrying his mat all the way home. Recovery a lot of times breaks us out of some of our traditional black and white thinking of what's right and wrong. And I'm not talking about liberalism here. I'm talking about the sense that there's a lot of religious stuff in our life that keeps us locked in. Our addictive thinking keeps us black and white. See, because as this man I call Jethro is walking, probably running, skipping, and hopping, and he's totally excited. I mean, it's the first time in his life he's walked. And he's carrying his mat, and he's going home, and he's going to show mom and dad and his family, hey, look, Mom, I can walk. Some religious leaders come walking by, and they suddenly see him. And they criticize, they point out, they judge. Says, what are you doing? Laboring on the Sabbath. We might think, and we hear this story, that somehow or another, it takes a great amount of faith to do something like this. We think, if I have the faith, then I can change my position in life. If I have the faith, I can heal my addiction or my woundedness or what's going on in me. Something, I just want to point out something here. This man never knew who Jesus was. There's a man walked up with the disciples behind him. He looked like a rabbi and says, do you want to be well? Get up, take your pallet, and go home. The man didn't even know who Jesus was. As a matter of fact, the story there in the 5th chapter, John tells us that later on at one of the festivals, this man bumps into Jesus and he says, whoa, here's the man, you healed me. Who are you? And Jesus introduces himself. Sometimes recovery is healing